I'm Melissa Bennett, 32, and I never thought I'd be the one to make my parents homeless. But when I discovered they'd emptied my savings account money I'd been setting aside for my daughter's cancer treatments, everything changed. The betrayal cut deeper when Dad looked me straight in the eyes and said the family needed it more than Hannah did. That night, while they slept soundly in the house I'd been secretly paying the mortgage on for years, I made one phone call that would tear our family apart forever. Before I dive into the most painful chapter of my life, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? I've learned through this ordeal that family betrayal happens everywhere, in every community. If my story resonates with you, please consider subscribing to this channel and hitting that like button. Family wounds run deep, and sometimes sharing our stories is the first step toward healing. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. When I still believed blood meant loyalty, I never planned to be a single mother. When I married my college sweetheart, Patrick, at 23, I imagined we'd grow old together, raise a family, and live that picture-perfect life you see in commercials. 2 years later, Hannah came into our world, a tiny bundle with her father's bright blue eyes and my unruly auburn hair. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Then, just after Hannah's third birthday, Patrick announced he'd fallen in love with someone from work. Within 6 months, I was signing divorce papers and figuring out how to raise our daughter alone. My parents, Ronald and Patricia Bennett, stepped up immediately. They watched Hannah when I needed to work late, brought home-cooked meals, and provided the emotional support I desperately needed during those first raw months. Family takes care of family, my father would say, his weathered hands squeezing my shoulder. Nothing is more important than blood. I believed him with every fiber of my being. With my real estate license and a determination to provide Hannah with stability, I threw myself into building a career. Westlake Heights, our small suburban community outside Boston, is experiencing a housing boom, and I quickly developed a reputation as an agent who went the extra mile. By the time Hannah started kindergarten, I was earning enough to move us from our cramped apartment to a modest 3-bedroom house with a backyard where Hannah could play. My success didn't happen in isolation. My parents were there every step of the way. Mom would pick Hannah up from school when I had showings. Dad would fix things around the house and give me financial advice. When my car broke down during a particularly tight month, they loaned me $3,000 without hesitation. Keep track of your money, Melissa, Dad advised when I opened my first business account. A retired accountant, he had always been meticulous with finances. Let me help you set up a system. With his guidance, I created multiple accounts, operating expenses, taxes, emergency fund, and a special savings account for Hannah's future. I added my parents as authorized users on my accounts, a decision that seemed sensible at the time. If anything happened to me, they would have immediate access to funds for Hannah's care. "You're being smart," Mom praised. Always plan ahead. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I'd drop Hannah off at school, close deals during the day, and spend evenings helping with homework or attending her dance recitals. My parents would join us for Sunday dinners, filling our home with laughter and the smell of Mom's famous pot roast. During school breaks, Hannah would sometimes stay with them, returning with stories of Grandpa teaching her chess or baking cookies with Grandma. The first sign of trouble appeared so subtly I nearly missed it. During a Sunday dinner 4 years ago, Dad mentioned he'd had a bit of luck at Foxwoods Casino. Mom quickly changed the subject, but not before I noticed the tension between them. I knew Dad enjoyed occasional poker games with his friends, but I never thought of him as a serious gambler. "It's nothing," Mom assured me privately when I asked. "Just a little hobby to keep him occupied since retirement." I accepted her explanation, not wanting to pry into their marriage. Besides, they seemed financially stable. They downsized after retirement, moving from our family home to a smaller ranch-style house in a nearby development. Vacations, drove sensible cars, and never complained about money. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. I stopped by their house unexpectedly one afternoon to drop off a birthday gift for Mom. Through the partially open office door, I overheard Dad on the phone, his voice strained. "Yes, I understand the consequences of foreclosure," he was saying. "I just need a little more time." I backed away, not wanting to embarrass him, but the conversation nagged at me. That evening, after putting Hannah to bed, I did something I'd never done before. I searched for my parents' mortgage information online through my real estate databases. What I found shocked me. They were 3 months behind on payments, and foreclosure proceedings were imminent. The next day, I contacted their mortgage company, using my industry connections and a significant portion of my savings. I negotiated a repayment plan and took over their monthly payments. I decided not to tell them, not wanting to wound my father's pride. I convinced myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. Meanwhile, my relationship with my brother Jeffrey remained complicated. 2 years my senior, Jeffrey had always been the golden child, where I was responsible and methodical. He was charming and spontaneous. Dad would beam with pride at Jeffrey's stories, even when they bordered on exaggeration or outright lies. Mom would always serve him the largest portion at dinner, save his favorite desserts, make excuses for his absences at family functions. "Your brother just marches to his own drummer," she would say whenever he disappointed her. I'd accepted my place in the family hierarchy long ago, but sometimes the favoritism still stung. Jeffrey would swoop in for holiday visits, showering Hannah with expensive gifts he couldn't afford, promising outings that often never materialized. He'd married Samantha, a quiet woman who always seemed slightly uncomfortable around our family. They lived about an hour away in Manchester. They had no children, something Mom frequently lamented. "I just wish Jeffrey would settle down properly," she'd sigh somehow, ignoring that her unmarried daughter had provided her only grandchild. Life continued this way until Hannah's 7th birthday, when she developed unusual bruises and a persistent fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to cure. After weeks of tests and specialists, we received the diagnosis that would shatter our world: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, a rare and aggressive form. With prompt treatment, the 5-year survival rate is encouraging. Dr. Matthews explained, her kind eyes meeting mine across her desk. But Hannah's genetic markers indicate she might benefit from a newer targeted therapy that's showing remarkable results in clinical trials. The treatment plan she outlined was comprehensive: standard chemotherapy combined with an experimental immunotherapy that had shown promising results for cases like Hannah's. The cost was staggering: $88,000 for the portions not covered by insurance, but I didn't hesitate. Hannah's life was worth any price. That evening, my parents arrived with overnight bags. "We're moving in," Mom announced, already heading toward the guest room. "You can't manage work, the house, and hospital visits alone." "That's what family does," Dad added, his arm around my shoulders. "We stand together." For the next few months, we fell into a new routine. I would take Hannah to treatments while trying to maintain enough work to keep our finances afloat. Mom would handle the cooking and housework. Dad would drive Hannah to her follow-up appointments when I had unavoidable showings or closings. Every penny I earned went toward Hannah's treatment fund. I cut all unnecessary expenses, took on additional listings, and worked evenings preparing market analyses when Hannah was asleep. Slowly, the special account grew. $88,000 seemed impossible at first, but after 8 months of grueling work and extreme saving, I was just $5,000 short of our goal. "We're almost there, sweetie," I told Hannah one night as I tucked her into bed. Her small body frail from the chemotherapy, but her spirit unbroken. "Soon you'll start the special medicine that's going to make you all better." "And then my hair will grow back?" she asked, her fingers touching her colorful headscarf. "Even prettier than before," I promised, kissing her forehead. What I didn't know then was that while I was saving my daughter's life, penny by penny, the foundation of trust I'd built with my parents was about to crumble beneath me. The morning everything changed began like any other. I woke at 5:30, checked on Hannah, who was sleeping peacefully for once, and made coffee while reviewing my calendar. I had a promising showing scheduled with first-time buyers, followed by a meeting with Dr. Matthews to finalize Hannah's treatment schedule. The experimental therapy would begin the following week, provided I made the final deposit today. I settled at my laptop, logged into my banking app, and navigated to Hannah's treatment fund. For a moment, I thought there must be an error. Where the balance should have read $83,000, it showed $0. I refreshed the page, then tried logging out. And back in, the result was the same, 0. My hands trembled as I called the bank's customer service line. After verifying my identity, the representative confirmed my worst fear. Yes, Miss Bennett. A withdrawal for $83,247.68 was processed yesterday at our downtown branch. The funds were withdrawn in person. That's impossible, I said, my voice rising. I didn't withdraw anything. According to our records, the withdrawal was made by Patricia Bennett, who is an authorized user on the account. We have this signed withdrawal slip on file. My mother had emptied the account. The room seemed to spin around me. Is anyone with her? I managed to ask. Our notes indicate she was, accompanied by a male, but he didn't approach the counter. I ended the call and immediately drove to the bank, barely remembering to leave a note for my parents that I had an early meeting. At the branch, the manager escorted me to a private office where she pulled up the transaction details. Here's the withdrawal slip, she said, turning her monitor toward me. There was my mother's signature along with what appeared to be my signature authorizing the withdrawal, except I hadn't signed anything. This isn't my signature, I said, pointing to the forgery. I never authorized this. The manager's expression shifted from professional sympathy to concern. Would you like to file a fraud claim, Miss Bennett? This is a serious allegation. I hesitated. Filing fraud charges would mean reporting my own parents to the police. Can I see the security footage first? 20 minutes later, I sat watching the video footage from the previous day. There was my mother at the teller window, my father standing several feet behind her, checking his watch impatiently. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m. while I was showing a property across town, and Hannah was at her art therapy session. I'd like copies of everything, I told the manager. The withdrawal slip, the footage, and the transaction record. But I need to speak with my parents before deciding on next steps. I drove home in a fog of disbelief and rising anger. My parents. Car was in the driveway. Inside, I found them in the kitchen with Hannah, who was eating the pancakes Mom had made. Mommy. Grandma made smiley faces with blueberries. Hannah exclaimed, her thin face lighting up. That looks delicious, sweetheart. I managed. Why don't you take your breakfast to the den and watch some cartoons? I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa. Once Hannah was out of earshot, I placed my phone on the kitchen island and played the security footage. Would either of you like to explain this? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. Melissa, we can explain, Mom began, her hands fluttering nervously. You forged my signature and took my daughter's treatment money, I said. What possible explanation could there be? Wasn't like that, Dad said. His voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood when his decisions weren't to be questioned. We needed to borrow it temporarily. Family emergency. What emergency could possibly be more important than Hannah's cancer treatment? I demanded. A long silence filled the kitchen. Finally, Dad spoke. Your brother is in trouble. Serious trouble. He owes some very dangerous people a lot of money. Gambling debts? I said flatly, the pieces falling into place. Jeffrey's gambling or yours? Jeffrey made some mistakes. Mom interjected quickly. But these aren't nice people he's dealing with. They threatened Samantha. Said they'd hurt her if he didn't pay. So you took Hannah's treatment money. Money that could save her life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The family needed it more than Hannah did, Dad said, his expression hardening. Hannah's doctor said she has a good chance even with conventional treatment. Jeffrey could have been killed. The callousness of his statement hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, this man who had taught me about family loyalty, who had held my hand at my divorce hearing, who read bedtime stories to his granddaughter even when he was tired. In that moment, he became a stranger to me. You chose Jeffrey over Hannah, I said softly. You chose your adult son over your 7-year-old granddaughter with cancer. It wasn't like that, Mom protested weakly. We were going to pay it back. How? I asked. With what money? You can't even pay your own mortgage. The words escaped before I could stop them. Mom looked confused, but Dad's expression changed to one of calculation. What are you talking about? Mom asked. Nothing, Dad said quickly. Melissa's upset. She doesn't know what she's saying. Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying, I replied, anger giving me clarity. I've been paying your mortgage for 3 years. Ever since you nearly lost the house, do you think I wouldn't find out about that too? You've been paying our mortgage? Mom turned to Dad. Ronald, what is she talking about? Before he could answer, Hannah appeared in the doorway, her small face pinched with worry. Mommy, why are you yelling? You mad at Grandma and Grandpa? I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to steady. We're just having a grown-up discussion. Go finish your cartoons, okay? After she reluctantly left, I turned back to my parents. I have a meeting with Dr. Matthews this afternoon to discuss delaying Hannah's treatment since I can no longer afford it. I suggest you both be gone before I get back. Melissa, please. Mom began crying. We're family. The family needed it. More, I repeated my father's words back to him. Isn't that what you said? Well, now we'll see what family really means. I left for my showing, somehow maintaining my professional demeanor while showing a young couple their potential first home. All the while, my mind was calculating, planning. By the time I met with Dr. Matthews to explain our situation and explore alternative treatment options, I knew exactly what I needed to do. That night, after my parents had gone to their room and Hannah was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with all the mortgage documents I'd kept hidden for years. With steady hands, I dialed the number for the mortgage company's customer service. I need to cancel the automatic payment arrangement for account number 78,293.05B. I told the representative, providing all the necessary verification information. Effective immediately. May I ask the reason for cancellation? The representative asked. I thought of my father's words, of Hannah's uncertain future, of 3 years of sacrifices made for people who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The arrangement is no longer required, I said simply. The account holders will be assuming responsibility for their own obligations from now on. After hanging up, I sat in the darkened kitchen for a long time, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life or the first step towards saving what mattered most. The discovery of my parents' near foreclosure 3 years ago still burned vividly in my memory. As I sat in that darkened kitchen, I remembered the afternoon I had visited Commonwealth Bank. Sitting across from Mr. Alderman, the mortgage specialist, whose gray mustache twitched nervously as he reviewed my parents' file. They're 3 months behind, he confirmed, glancing at me over reading glasses. The foreclosure process has been initiated unless they can bring the account current. That's $12,436, including late fees. They'll lose the house within 60 days. I'd gone there prepared to help, but the amount shocked me. Still, these were my parents, the people who had sat up with me during childhood fevers, who had cheered at every school play and graduation, who now helped me raise my daughter. What if I could take over the payments? Not officially refinancing, but ensuring they're made on time. Mr. Alderman had explained the process. I could set up automatic payments from my account without changing the loan's ownership. The bank wouldn't notify my parents as long as the payments arrived consistently. I'd signed the paperwork that day, stretching my budget to cover their $1,650 monthly mortgage payment on top of my own expenses. To make it work, I cut my own spending drastically. No more hair salon visits, no new clothes, meal planning to minimize grocery costs. Taking on additional listings even when I was exhausted. I'd converted my 401k to cover the initial catch-up payment, incurring penalties I could ill afford. All this I had done willingly, believing I was helping the people who had always helped me. Now, as I sorted through 3 years of bank statements and mortgage receipts, a new detail caught my eye. Among the papers was a letter addressed to my father from Commonwealth Bank dated just 2 months after I'd begun making payments. It thanked him for resolving the delinquency and confirmed that the automatic payment arrangement was successfully established. They had known all along. The realization hit me like a physical blow. For 3 years, I believed I was secretly helping them, protecting my father's pride. But they'd received this notification and never said a word, never thanked me, never offered to take back the responsibility, never even acknowledged what I was doing for them. With shaking hands, I continued digging through financial documents I'd collected. Bank statements from their joint checking account revealed something even more disturbing. Regular transfers to Jeffrey's account. $500 one month, $700 another. Sometimes even larger amounts when their Social Security checks arrived. A bitter laugh escaped me. While I was paying their mortgage, they were funneling money to my brother, the same brother whose gambling debts they now deemed more important than my daughter's life. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my online banking. A thorough review of my accounts revealed more betrayals. Small transfers from my checking account to theirs, $50 here, $75 there. Transactions I'd overlooked in the chaos of managing work and Hannah's illness. Each one was labeled Ron Pat in the banking system, my parents' shared nickname. They'd been skimming from my account for months, possibly longer. As dawn approached, I found myself surrounded by evidence of years of financial manipulation. Notes from phone conversations with Jeffrey, where he mentioned needing money just until next month. Credit card statements showing purchases in stores I knew my parents frequented, but for items they never mentioned buying. The most damning document was a birthday card Jeffrey had sent Dad last year. Among the generic well wishes was a handwritten note, "Thanks for always having my back. Don't worry about Melissa finding out about our arrangement. She's too busy with Hannah to notice what goes through her accounts. Our arrangement." The words seared themselves into my mind. I thought about Hannah sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that her grandparents and uncle had conspired to steal her chance at life. My daughter, who still made Father's Day cards for the grandfather who had chosen her uncle over her. The final piece fell into place when I found emails between my father and Jeffrey from 6 months ago. Jeffrey had been threatening to cut contact, to prevent them from seeing his future children if they didn't step up to help him financially. My parents, terrified of losing their golden child, had capitulated to his emotional blackmail time and again. By morning, I had compiled everything into a meticulous file. Evidence of the forged signature, bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawal, proof they'd known about the mortgage payments, documentation of the systematic small transfers from my accounts, and the trail of financial support to Jeffrey. I called my attorney, Eleanor Winters, and scheduled an emergency appointment for that afternoon. Next, I contacted the mortgage company again, speaking with a supervisor to ensure the cancellation of payments was properly processed, and to inform them that any further communication should be directed solely to the account holders. My parents. I need to understand my legal position, I explained to the supervisor. They claimed they weren't aware I was making these payments. What recourse would they have? According to our records, Mr. Bennett was notified of the payment arrangement in writing. The supervisor confirmed. We have his signature acknowledging receipt of that notification. If he's claiming otherwise, that would be problematic for him. I thanked her and ended the call, feeling a cold sense of resolution settling over me. 3 years of financial sacrifice, done out of love and family obligation, had been repaid with the worst kind of betrayal. The mortgage payments had been my choice, but taking Hannah's treatment money was unforgivable. As I heard movement upstairs, my parents beginning their day as if nothing had happened, I made one final decision. I wrote a formal letter stating that I was revoking their authorization on all my accounts, effective immediately, citing the unauthorized withdrawal and forged signature. I would deliver it to the bank in person that morning. The wood stairs creaked as my father descended, wearing the faded blue robe I'd given him 2 Christmases ago. "Morning, Mel," he said cautiously, using my childhood nickname. "Coffee ready?" I looked at this man I'd trusted implicitly my entire life, who had taught me that family was sacred, who now couldn't meet my eyes. "It's made," I replied flatly. "Help yourself. I'll be back this evening. I expect we'll have a lot to discuss." As I walked out the door, I felt something shift inside me. The death of blind trust, yes, but also the birth of something stronger. A determination that Hannah would get her treatment with, or without the support of the people who should have protected her most. 2 weeks passed in a fog of determined action and deafening silence. After that first morning, I had returned home to find my parents gone, taking their overnight bags, but leaving behind a handwritten note from my mother. "We're giving you space. Call when you're ready to talk." I had crumpled it and thrown it away. In those 2 weeks, I declined 17 calls from my mother, 12 from my father, and an unexpected 3 from Jeffrey. Instead, I channeled all my energy into finding alternative ways to save Hannah. There are compassionate care programs Dr. Matthews suggested during our rescheduled appointment. Hannah's case would be compelling. The challenge is that approval can take months, and her condition doesn't have months. I understand. That evening, after tucking Hannah in, I created a GoFundMe campaign. Sitting at my laptop, I stared at the blank template for nearly an hour before finally typing. "Hannah's fight. 7-year-old cancer warrior needs your help." I included only the essential facts: Hannah's diagnosis, the recommended treatment, and the theft of her medical fund. I didn't name my parents, referring to them only as family members who betrayed her trust. I set the goal at $90,000, giving us a small buffer for additional expenses. After hitting publish, I closed my laptop and cried for the first time since, discovering the theft not just for the money, but for the loss of what I believed my family to be. The next morning, I received a text from a number I hadn't seen in 5 years. "Thomas, my ex-husband. Melissa, I just saw the GoFundMe. Is Hannah really sick? Why didn't you tell me?" I hadn't contacted him because he had made his choice years ago. After leaving us for his coworker Diane, he'd moved to Chicago and started a new family. His child support payments came regularly, but his visits had dwindled to brief FaceTime calls on birthdays and holidays. "Yes, she has leukemia," I texted back, "diagnosed 8 months ago. I didn't want to disrupt your new life." His response came immediately: "I'm catching the next flight to Boston." I didn't believe him until he appeared on my doorstep the following afternoon, his familiar face etched with worry and regret. "I should have been here," were his first words. "For both of you." While Thomas's return was unexpected, even more surprising was how quickly our story spread. By the 3rd day, the GoFundMe had reached $18,000 in donations, many from strangers who shared their own stories of family betrayal in the comments. By the end of the week, we'd reached $30,000. Then came the call from Westlake Daily, our local newspaper. Reporter named Sophia Hayes wanted to interview me about Hannah's situation. My first instinct was to decline. I never intended to make this public, but Hannah's life was at stake, and pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. The article appeared 2 days later. Local mother fights for daughter's life after family members steal cancer treatment fund. The piece was respectful but unflinching, detailing Hannah's diagnosis, the experimental treatment that offered her best chance, and how family members had emptied her medical fund without permission. I never wanted to share this publicly. I was quoted saying, but when Hannah asked me why she couldn't start her special medicine, I realized silence wasn't protecting anyone but the people who betrayed her. The morning the article was published, my parents appeared unannounced on my doorstep. I hadn't seen them since the confrontation in my kitchen 2 weeks earlier. Mom looked like she'd aged years, her usually perfectly styled hair limp around. Her pale face. Dad stood rigid, his expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. How could you? Dad demanded, waving a copy of the newspaper, dragging our family business into the public eye. I stood in the doorway, blocking their entry. I didn't name you. Everyone in town knows it's us, Mom cried. Our church group, our friends, they're all calling, asking if it's true. Is that really your concern right now? I asked incredulously. Your reputation. You have no idea what you've done, Dad continued, his voice rising. We were going to fix this. We were going to get the money back. How? When? I challenged. Hannah's treatment was supposed to start last week. Every day we delay reduces her chances. We would have figured something out, he insisted. Family problems should stay within the family. Family. I laughed bitterly. You stopped being family the moment you decided Jeffrey was more important than Hannah's life. Thomas appeared behind me, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. I think you should both leave, he said quietly but firmly. Dad's face contorted at the sight of my ex-husband. What's he doing here? Back to play daddy now that things are tough. At least he came back, I said, which is more than I can. Say for the grandparents who abandoned her when she needed them most. Our raised voices had attracted attention. Mrs. Lawson from next door had paused while watering her flowers. Across the street, the Garcia family had stopped unloading groceries from their car. This is exactly what I mean, Dad hissed, noticing the neighbors. You're making a spectacle. I didn't steal from a sick child, I interrupted. And I find it interesting that you're more concerned about what the neighbors think than about whether Hannah will live or die. That's not fair, Melissa, Mom sobbed. We love Hannah. Love doesn't empty her medical fund, I replied coldly. And speaking of funds, I've been meaning to ask, have you made your mortgage payment this month? Dad's expression shifted instantly. From indignation to alarm. What did you do? I canceled the automatic payments, I said. The ones I've been making for 3 years while you funneled money to Jeffrey. The arrangement you knew about but never acknowledged. Can't do that, Dad sputtered. We'll lose the house. The family needed it more. I quoted his own words back to him. A car pulled into the driveway. Jeffrey's silver BMW. He emerged, wearing designer sunglasses that probably cost more than Hannah's monthly medication. What the hell, Melissa? He shouted, striding toward us. You're trying to destroy our parents' lives with these lies. Lies, I echoed. I have bank statements. Jeffrey, I have the forged withdrawal slip. I have emails between you and Dad discussing our arrangement. The color drained from my brother's face. He had no right to go through Dad's emails. And you had no right to take Hannah's treatment money, I countered. How much of it have you already gambled away? Jeffrey looked to our father for support, but Dad was staring at a man in a business suit approaching up the walkway, an official-looking envelope in hand. Ronald Bennett. The man inquired formally. Yes, Dad answered wearily. This is for you. The man handed over the envelope. You've been served with a formal notice of foreclosure proceedings for property at 247 Oakwood Lane. The timing was so perfect it almost seemed staged. Mom gasped, clutching Dad's arm as he tore open the envelope with trembling hands. This can't be right, he muttered, scanning the document. They can't foreclose this quickly. They can when you're all ready. On thin ice, I explained. When your daughter has been the only thing standing between you and foreclosure for 3 years and suddenly stops paying, You're tearing this family apart," Jeffrey accused, stepping forward aggressively until Thomas moved between us. "Jeffrey," I said, my voice steady, "you did that when you manipulated our parents into stealing from Hannah." "I didn't tell them to take the money," he protested. "No? Then where did they get the idea? And where did the money go?" I challenged, "because I know exactly how much Dad sends you every month. I know about the threatening calls from your bookies. I know everything." The confrontation had drawn a small crowd of neighbors. Some pretended to check their mail or work in their gardens, but all were watching the drama unfold. "This isn't over, Melissa," Dad warned, his voice low. "You think you're punishing us, but you're just hurting Hannah. She needs her grandparents." "What Hannah needs is her medicine," I replied. "The medicine you stole from her." As they retreated to their cars, Jeffrey peeling out dramatically, my parents following more slowly, I felt hollow rather than victorious. The family I trusted was gone, replaced by strangers who had chosen their own interests over my daughter's life. That evening, as Hannah and I sat on the porch swing, she looked up at me with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her young. "Face our grandma and grandpa mad at us?" she asked softly. "No, sweetheart," I answered, choosing my words carefully. "They made some mistakes, and now they need to fix them. But it doesn't change how much they love you." It was a lie, but a merciful one. How could I tell her that the grandparents who read her bedtime stories had valued her uncle's gambling debts above her life? If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that family isn't just about blood. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are those we're related to, while strangers step up in ways we never expected. As Hannah fell asleep against my shoulder, I checked the GoFundMe on my phone one last time before bed. The total now stood at $32,580, still far short of what we needed, but a testament to the kindness of strangers and friends who had rallied around us in our darkest hour. I wondered if you've ever had to rebuild your definition of family after betrayal. It's a painful process, but sometimes necessary. If you're going through something similar, please know you're not alone. We'll continue this journey together. In the next part of my story, the day after the confrontation in my driveway, my phone rang continuously. Colleagues from my real estate office, parents from Hannah's school, neighbors I barely knew all, calling to offer support after reading the newspaper article. By afternoon, my broker, Vivian, called an impromptu office meeting. "We take care of our own," she announced to our team of 20 agents gathered in the conference room. "Melissa and Hannah are family to us, and we protect family. Okay? Real family, not people who steal from sick children." The pointed distinction wasn't lost on anyone. Within hours, my colleagues had organized a rotating schedule of meal deliveries, rides to Hannah's appointments, and open houses for my listings so I wouldn't lose commissions while focusing on Hannah's care. James, our office's marketing director, revamped Hannah's GoFundMe page with professional photos and compelling copy. Rachel, who specialized in luxury properties, contacted her wealthy clients directly. Michael, our resident tech expert, created a dedicated website called Hannah's Heroes where people could donate, share stories, and offer services. The response was overwhelming. Hannah's GoFundMe reached $45,000 within 5 days of the website launch. Local businesses joined the effort. The Italian restaurant where we celebrated Hannah's birthdays donated a percentage of their weekend sales. The children's boutique where I bought Hannah's clothes organized a fashion show fundraiser. Even Hannah's dance studio arranged a special performance with all proceeds going toward her treatment. On the 6th day, I received a notification of a $50,000 donation from an anonymous donor. The accompanying message read simply, "Some family is chosen, not born. Martin sends his love. Martin, my father's estranged brother whom I hadn't seen since I was 12. Uncle Martin, whose name was forbidden in our house after some long-ago dispute my parents refused to discuss." I stared at the message in disbelief. With this donation, we had surpassed our goal. Hannah could begin treatment immediately. But who had contacted Martin? How did he even know about our situation? The mystery was solved the next morning when a tall, silver-haired man appeared at my door. Though 20 years had passed, I recognized him immediately. He had the same Bennett blue eyes, the same cleft in his chin that Dad and Jeffrey shared. "Uncle Martin," I whispered, hardly believing he was real. "Hello, Melissa." He smiled gently. "You've grown up beautiful, just like your mother always said you would." We sat in my living room, two virtual strangers connected by blood and separated by decades of family secrets. "I saw the article," he explained, stirring sugar into his coffee. "A friend in Boston sent it to me. I've been living in Vermont for the past 15 years, running a small accounting firm. When I read what happened, I knew I had to help." "Donation?" I said. "That was you?" He nodded. "I've done well for myself. No children of my own, but a career that's been good to me. Using some of that to help Hannah seemed right." "Why did you stay away so long?" I asked the question that had lingered since childhood. Martin sighed, setting down his cup. "Your father and I had a fundamental disagreement about money and family. He borrowed a substantial amount from me years ago, supposedly for a business investment. I later discovered he'd used it to cover gambling debts. When I confronted him, he accused me of trying to embarrass him in front of his family." "Dad gambled back then, too?" I asked, pieces falling into place. "It's been his demon for most of his adult life," Martin confirmed. "There were good periods when he had it under control, but stress always triggered relapses. If your mother enabled him, covered for him. I insisted he get help as a condition of further financial support. He chose estrangement instead. And now, history is repeating with Jeffrey," I murmured. "The apple doesn't fall far," Martin agreed sadly. "When Jeffrey was 17, your father caught him running a small betting operation at his high school. Instead of consequences, there were excuses. I warned Ronald then that he was setting a dangerous precedent." We talked for hours about the past, about Hannah's condition, about the family dynamics I never fully understood. Martin showed me old photographs he'd kept all these years, Dad and him as boys fishing with their father. My parents' wedding where Martin had been best man, a Christmas gathering where baby Jeffrey sat on Martin's knee. "Family is complicated," he said as he prepared to leave. "But some things are simple. You don't steal from children. You don't abandon someone fighting for their life. Will you stay?" I asked impulsively. "Meet Hannah?" His eyes brightened. "Like that very much." While Uncle Martin's appearance was unexpected, equally surprising was the community's reaction to my parents. Their church group, where they'd been respected members for decades, was divided. Pastor Reynolds called me directly, his normally jovial voice somber. "Melissa, I want you to know that while the church believes in forgiveness, we also believe in accountability. Your parents have been asked to step down from their leadership positions until this situation is resolved appropriately." From neighborhood gossip that inevitably reached me, I learned that most of their friends had distanced themselves. Their weekly bridge club had quietly removed them from the rotation. Invitations to social events suddenly dried up. In a small community like ours, stealing from a sick child was an unforgivable sin. Jeffrey wasn't faring much better. His employer, an investment firm in Manchester, placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into ethical concerns. Apparently, using family connections to access funds raised ethical red flags in financial services. Not everyone abandoned. My parents, though, their neighbors the Sullivans, stood firmly by them, even writing a letter to the editor defending them as good people who made one terrible mistake. Dad's poker buddies closed ranks around him, refusing to discuss the situation with outsiders. One unexpected ally emerged in my cousin Amanda, my mother's niece, whom we rarely saw due to some long-ago slight. She called me out of the blue. "What Uncle Ronald and Aunt Patricia did was wrong," she stated bluntly. "But you should know it's not the first time. 10 years ago, they convinced my mother to remortgage her house to invest in some business. Opportunity, the money disappeared. The business never materialized, and Mom nearly lost everything. Why didn't she say anything? I asked, stunned by this revelation. Pride, shame, the same reasons victims of financial abuse usually stay quiet, Amanda replied. But when I saw that article, I knew I had to call. You're not alone, Melissa. They've done this before. Other stories began to surface. Distant relatives, old friends, former neighbors who had similar experiences with my parents, financial manipulations. What I had believed was an isolated incident of desperation was revealed as a pattern spanning decades. Through it all, the GoFundMe continued to grow. With Martin's donation pushing us over the goal, additional contributions created a cushion for future medical expenses. The mortgage company, after learning the full situation from documentation my attorney provided, worked with me to establish a formal record of the payments I'd made on my parents' behalf over the years. While we can't stop the foreclosure process, without payment, the compassionate account manager explained, we've documented your contributions. If your parents attempt to claim they were unaware of the arrangement, we have evidence proving otherwise. Dr. Matthews was able to schedule Hannah's experimental treatment to begin the following week. For the first time in months, hope felt tangible rather than theoretical. The protocol is aggressive, she warned during our pre-treatment consultation. There will be difficult days ahead, but Hannah's youth and the early intervention give her excellent odds. We're ready, I assured her, squeezing Hannah's small hand. We've faced worse than medicine. The day before treatment began, Thomas and I took Hannah to her favorite park. As she played on the swings, her colorful headscarf fluttering in the breeze, Thomas turned to me. I was wrong to leave, he said quietly. I've missed so much. I've missed her growing up, becoming this incredible person. I've missed being there. For you both. You're here now, I acknowledged. That counts for something. I want to be part of the solution, he continued. I've transferred to the Boston office permanently. My relationship with Diane ended months ago. It was never right, not like what we had. I'm not asking for us to reconcile, but I want to be. Hannah's father. Again, a real father. Before I could respond, my phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Melissa Bennett? A woman's hesitant voice asked. Yes, who's calling? This is Samantha, Jeffrey's wife. She spoke quickly, as if afraid of being overheard. I need to talk to you. Not over the phone. Can we meet? The pieces were still falling into place, connections forming between past and present. Revelations illuminating dark corners of my family history. As I watched Hannah swing higher, her face lifted toward the sun, I realized that while one version of family had crumbled, another was taking shape around us, built on honesty, accountability, and genuine love rather than obligation and secrets. And for the first time since this ordeal began, that felt like enough. The formal foreclosure notice arrived at my parents' house exactly 30 days after I canceled the mortgage payments. I didn't witness its delivery, but heard about it through Mrs. Lawson, whose sister lived on my parents' street. According to neighborhood gossip, my father had a public meltdown, yelling at the courier before collapsing in the driveway, clutching his chest. They took him to Massachusetts General, Mrs. Lawson informed me as I collected Hannah's mail. Your mother rode in the ambulance with him. They're saying it might have been a minor heart attack. I thanked her for the information and went inside. Emotions warring within me. Part of me, the daughter who had idolized her father, wanted to rush to the hospital immediately. But another part, the mother protecting her vulnerable child, reminded me of his callous words. The family needed it more than Hannah did. I didn't visit the hospital. Instead, I focused on Hannah, who had begun her experimental treatment 2 days earlier. The procedure involved extracting her T cells, modifying them in a lab to better recognize and attack cancer cells, then reinfusing them. The side effects could be severe: high fevers, confusion, respiratory distress, requiring constant monitoring. You're being so brave, I told her as we sat in the treatment room, watching the modified cells drip back into her body. Braver than anyone I know. Even braver than Grandpa. She asked innocently. He always says he's the bravest because he was a volunteer firefighter. The mention of my father sent a pang through my heart. Yes, even braver than Grandpa. Hannah frowned. When are they coming to visit? I miss Grandma's special pancakes. They're taking some time away, I answered carefully. Grandpa isn't feeling well. Is he sick like me? Her eyes widened with concern. Noah, different kind of sick, but he'll be okay. At least I hoped that was true. 3 days after Dad's hospitalization, my mother appeared on my doorstep alone. She looked diminished somehow, her normally perfect makeup absent, her clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. Ronald's being discharged tomorrow, she said without preamble. He had a mild cardiac event brought on by stress. The doctor says he needs to avoid upsetting situations. I stood in the doorway, neither inviting her in nor sending her away. I'm sorry to hear that, are you? Her voice cracked. You canceled our mortgage payments. You went to the newspaper. You turned our friends against us. You really sorry? He's in the hospital. I didn't want him hurt, I said honestly. I wanted accountability. He could have died, Melissa. And Hannah could die without her treatment, I countered. The treatment you stole from her. Mom's shoulders slumped. Please come in. There are things you need to know. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Hannah was at the hospital for treatment with Thomas, giving us privacy for this conversation. In my living room, Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Your father has a gambling addiction, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. It started before we were married. Small bets on sports games, friendly poker nights. I thought it was under control for many years, but after he retired, it escalated. That doesn't excuse stealing Hannah's treatment money, I said. I'm not offering excuses, she replied. Just explanations you deserve to hear. The foreclosure 3 years ago, that wasn't just financial mismanagement. Ronald lost our retirement savings at Foxwoods. $63,000 gone in a weekend. He swore he'd stop after that. Even attended Gamblers Anonymous for a while. But he didn't stop, I guessed. She shook her head. He got better at hiding it. I enabled him, covered for him. When you started paying our mortgage, yes, we knew. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd get back on our feet and repay you. And Jeffrey, I asked, how does he fit into this? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, she sighed, unconsciously echoing Uncle Martin's words. Jeffrey started gambling in college. Small stuff at first, then larger bets. Ronald saw himself in Jeffrey, wanted to protect him from the consequences he'd faced. It became a cycle. Jeffrey would get in trouble, we'd bail him out, he promised. To change, then the cycle would repeat. With my money, I pointed out, yes, she admitted, tears welling. With your money, with Hannah's money, I'm not proud, Melissa. I've failed as a mother, as a grandmother. I let my husband's addiction and my son's manipulation destroy our family. Her raw honesty caught me off guard. Throughout my childhood, my mother had been the family's emotional gatekeeper, smoothing over conflicts, maintaining the facade of harmony even when tensions simmered beneath the surface. This vulnerable confession was entirely new. Why now? I asked. Why are you telling me this now? 'Cause I nearly lost my husband, she said simply. 'Cause I've already lost my daughter and granddaughter. 'Cause the lies have cost us everything. And the truth is all I have left to offer. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of family secrets hanging between us. What do you want from me? I finally asked. Forgiveness, understanding. I don't know if I deserve either, she answered. But I'd like a chance. To make amends, somehow. And I'd like to see Hannah, not to excuse what we did, but because I love her. Because she's innocent in all this. I can't just pretend nothing happened, I said. The money is still gone. Hannah's treatment is still at risk. I know, Mom nodded, which is why I brought this. She reached into her purse and withdrew. A manila envelope. It's not everything, but it's a start. Inside was the deed to their car and a jewelry appraisal for my mother's engagement ring and wedding set. The car is paid off, worth about $20,000, she explained. The jewelry is appraised at $12,000. It won't replace everything we took, but it's what we can offer now. I stared at the documents, unsure how to respond. The gesture was significant. My mother cherished that ring. But it also highlighted how dire their financial situation must be if they were liquidating such personal assets. "What about Jeffrey?" I asked. "Is he contributing to the repayment?" Mom's expression hardened. "Jeffrey claims he never asked us to take Hannah's treatment money specifically. Says he just needed help with his debts, not cancer money. He's washing his hands of responsibility. Typical," I muttered. As we sat there, my phone buzzed with a text from Samantha, Jeffrey's wife, confirming our meeting for the following day. I'd been both curious and apprehensive about what she wanted to discuss since her mysterious call. "I appreciate the gesture," I told Mom, returning the documents to the envelope. "But this isn't just about money. It's about trust, about Hannah's well-being, about years of favoring Jeffrey over me." "I know," she said quietly, "and I can't change the past, but maybe we can build something different for the future, something honest." Before I could respond, the front door opened and Hannah's voice called out, "Mommy, the doctor says my numbers are better." She bounded into the living room, then stopped abruptly at the sight of her grandmother. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, rushing forward for a hug before I could intervene. Mom embraced her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my sweet girl." Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression questioning. I gave a small nod to indicate the situation was under control. "Grandma, are you crying because you're sad or happy?" Hannah asked, pulling back to study her grandmother's face. "A little of both," Mom answered honestly. "Sad about some mistakes I made, but very happy to see you." "Is Grandpa still sick?" Hannah inquired. "It's getting better," Mom assured her, "and he misses you very much." I watched their interaction with mixed emotions. Despite everything, Hannah loved her grandparents. Was it fair to sever that relationship because of the adults' failures? My therapist, Dr. Winslow, had been helping me work through this very question in our weekly sessions. "Children are remarkably resilient," she had told me. "They can understand complex family dynamics if explained appropriately. The question isn't whether your parents deserve a relationship with Hannah, but whether that relationship is beneficial to her." Looking at Hannah's joyful face as she told her grandmother about her treatment, I wasn't sure I knew the answer. Later that evening, after Mom had left with promises to talk again soon, Thomas and I discussed the visit while Hannah slept. "What are you thinking?" he asked as we sat on the porch swing. "I'm thinking family is complicated," I sighed. "Part of me wants to maintain this wall between us to protect Hannah and myself from further hurt. But another part sees how much Hannah loves them, how much losing them would affect her." "Your mother seemed genuinely remorseful," Thomas observed. "She did," I agreed. "But words are easy. Actions are what matter." The next day brought another piece of the puzzle when I met Samantha at a quiet cafe across town. Jeffrey's wife was a slender woman with anxious eyes, who constantly checked over her shoulder as if expecting to be discovered. Jeffrey doesn't. "No, I'm here," she admitted, stirring her untouched coffee. "He'd be furious if he found out." "Why the secrecy?" I asked. "Because I'm done protecting him," she said with sudden fierceness. "Your parents aren't the only victims of his manipulation. I've been covering for him for years, making excuses for the missing money. The late-night calls from bookies, the threats." She pulled out her phone and showed me texts from Jeffrey, pressuring their parents for money. Using increasingly desperate tactics, claiming medical emergencies, car accidents, job losses, and finally, threats from loan sharks. He specifically mentioned Hannah's treatment fund, Samantha revealed. "Told your father it was just sitting there while he was in real danger," said Hannah. "Could use regular treatment, and that the experimental stuff was just extra. That Hannah would be fine either way. But he might not be if he didn't get the money. And Dad believed him. I asked incredulously. Your father believes what he wants to believe about Jeffrey, Samantha said bitterly. Always has. And Jeffrey knows exactly which buttons to push. He's not just a gambler, Melissa. It's a manipulator. He's been playing everyone against each other for years. Why tell me this now? Because I'm leaving him, she stated firmly. I've accepted a job in Seattle, as far from here as I can get. But before I go, I wanted you to know the truth. Your parents did something unforgivable, but they were manipulated by a master. Jeffrey knew exactly what he was doing when he convinced them to take that money. As I drove home, I considered how this new information fit into the complex family picture. Parents had made their own choices. Terrible, selfish choices, but they'd been expertly manipulated by a son who knew their weaknesses intimately. Did that change anything? Did it make their betrayal any less devastating? The answer wasn't simple. Nothing about family ever is. That evening, as Hannah and I made cookies, a small celebration of her improving blood counts, she looked up at me with flour on her nose. Mommy, are you still mad at Grandma and Grandpa? I hesitated, wanting to be honest without burdening her. I'm disappointed in some choices they made, but I still love them, just like I'll always love you, no matter what. Can they come visit again? She asked hopefully. Grandpa could bring his chess set. He promised to teach me the horsey moves. Looking at her hopeful face, I realized that while healing my relationship with my parents would be a long, complicated process with no guarantees, Hannah's relationship with them could perhaps be salvaged with proper boundaries and supervision. We'll see, I told her, which wasn't a yes, but wasn't a no either. First, let's focus on getting you better. Then, we can think about chess lessons. As I tucked her into bed that night, surrounded by the stuffed animals Uncle Martin had brought, during his last visit, reflected on the strange new family configuration taking shape around us, my renewed connection with my ex-husband, the unexpected presence of my long-lost uncle, the tentative olive branch from my mother, and the permanent absence of my manipulative brother. Not the family I was born into, but perhaps the family Hannah and I needed now. 6 months passed, like a series of photographs snapped in quick succession. Hannah ringing the bell at the hospital after completing her experimental treatment, my parents moving into a small apartment after the foreclosure was finalized, Cole Martin teaching Hannah to play chess on Sunday afternoons. The last of Jeffrey's possessions being removed from my parents' storage unit after he relocated to Las Vegas without saying goodbye to anyone. Most precious of all, Hannah's latest scan showing no detectable cancer cells. We'll continue monitoring closely, Dr. Matthews cautioned during our follow-up appointment. But the results are extremely encouraging. The experimental therapy worked exactly as we'd hoped. When will my hair grow back? Hannah asked, tugging at the colorful scarf Uncle Martin had brought her from his trip to Italy. It's already starting. Dr. Matthews pointed to the soft fuzz appearing on Hannah's scalp. By Christmas, you'll have a cute pixie cut. Evening, we held a small celebration dinner. Hannah, Thomas, Uncle Martin, and me. My parents weren't included. Our relationship remained cautious, constrained by boundaries I'd established. After careful consideration, I had decided, with Dr. Winslow's guidance, to help them find affordable senior housing rather than have them move in with us as they'd initially suggested. I'd accompanied them to view apartments, co-signed their lease for the modest one-bedroom they could afford on their Social Security income, and even helped coordinate their downsizing yard sale. What I wouldn't do was pay their bills or give them unrestricted access to Hannah. Our interactions occurred under specific conditions: addiction treatment for my father, regular family therapy sessions, and absolute transparency regarding finances. Recovery is a process, Dad's addiction counselor had explained during a joint session. Ronald is making progress, but gambling addiction has one of the highest relapse rates of any addiction. The compulsion doesn't simply disappear. Dad had nodded solemnly. One day at a time, he'd said, the gambler's anonymous mantra now familiar on his lips. The money remained a complicated issue. My parents had sold their car and mom's jewelry as promised, generating about $32,000 toward the $83,000 they'd taken. They'd established a payment plan for the remainder, transferring small amounts monthly from their limited income. At that rate, it would take decades to repay the full amount, a fact we all acknowledged but rarely discussed. The unexpected silver lining came from the community's response to Hannah's story. The GoFundMe had ultimately raised over $120,000, far exceeding our goal. After covering Hannah's treatment and associated medical expenses, the surplus allowed me to establish a foundation called Hannah's Hope, providing emergency assistance to other families facing catastrophic childhood illnesses. From something terrible came something beautiful, Uncle Martin observed as we cut Hannah's cancer-free celebration cake. Like when the forest burns and new trees grow, Hannah added with the wisdom that continued to astonish me. Her ordeal had given her a perspective most adults never achieve. Thomas, who had indeed transferred permanently to Boston, caught my eye across the table. Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us had expected. Not quite reconciliation, but a deeper partnership focused on Hannah's well-being. He had proven himself changed, more present and committed than he'd been during our marriage. 2 new beginnings, he proposed, raising his glass. And to Hannah, Uncle Martin added, the bravest person at this table. We all clinked glasses. Even Hannah, with her sparkling cider, celebrating not just her recovery, but the reconfigured family that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly 2 weeks after Hannah's celebration dinner. Jeffrey, whom I hadn't seen or spoken to since the confrontation in my driveway, appeared at my office unannounced. 5 minutes, he said, when my assistant tried to turn him away. That's all I'm asking. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. The brother who entered my office looked different from the confident manipulator I remembered. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that manifested in constantly fidgeting hands. Samantha left me, he began without preamble. She sent divorce papers from Seattle. I know, I replied. She told me she was leaving months ago. He looked startled. You've been in contact with my wife. Ex-wife soon, I corrected. And yes, we've spoken several times. Jeffrey ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our father that it momentarily caught me off guard. I'm moving to Vegas, he announced. Fresh start. Got a job dealing blackjack at the Bellagio. Couldn't help but laugh at the irony. A gambling addict working in a casino. Sounds like a recipe for disaster. I'm not, Dad, he said defensively. I can control it. That's exactly what Dad always said, I pointed out right before he lost everything again. Jeffrey's expression hardened. I didn't come here for a lecture. Why did you come, Jeffrey? To say goodbye? To apologize? To ask for money? I came to tell you I never meant for them to take Hannah's treatment fund, he said, not meeting my eyes. I just asked for help with some debts. I didn't specify where the money should come from. That's your defense. That you didn't specifically instruct them to steal from a sick child? I shook my head in disbelief. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew about Hannah's treatment. You knew how expensive it was. You knew they didn't have money of their own to give you. You don't understand what it's like, he insisted. These weren't ordinary debts. These people would have hurt Samantha. And you were willing to hurt Hannah to protect her, I said. Coldly, your choice is clear. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something genuine in his eye shame. Perhaps, or the realization of what he'd done, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by the familiar defense of anger. I just wanted you to know my side before I left, he said, standing to leave. I won't be back. Goodbye, Jeffrey, I said simply. I hope you find whatever you're looking for in Vegas. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about choices and consequences. Jeffrey had chosen to run rather than face what he'd done. My parents had chosen, however belatedly, to acknowledge their failures and work toward redemption. I had chosen to protect Hannah while leaving the door cracked open for healing. None of these choices were simple or perfect, but they were authentic reflections of who we had become. The holiday season brought another milestone, our first family gathering since the betrayal. I had decided, after much deliberation, to invite my parents to Thanksgiving dinner. Carl Martin would be there along with Thomas and Hannah. It would be small, controlled, and a test of whether we could forge a new kind of relationship. "You sure about this?" Thomas asked as we prepared. "The turkey that morning, you don't owe them this." "I'm not doing it for them," I explained, measuring stuffing ingredients. "I'm doing it for Hannah, and maybe a little for myself. Carrying anger is exhausting." When they arrived, Mom brought her famous pumpkin pie, and Dad carried a small wrapped gift for Hannah. They moved cautiously, like visitors in a museum, afraid of breaking the exhibits. Dad had lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Mom's hair had more gray than I remembered. "Thank you for including us," Mom said quietly as she hung up her coat. "We know it's a privilege, not a right." Dinner was awkward at first, conversations stilted and careful. But Hannah, bless her resilient heart, bridged the gaps with stories about school and her excitement about her growing hair. "Look, Grandpa," she exclaimed, removing her headscarf to reveal about an inch of soft brown fuzz. "The doctor says by Christmas I'll have a pixie cut." "Beautiful," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like your mother at your age." The moment that truly shifted the atmosphere came during dessert. Uncle Martin, who had maintained a polite but distant relationship with my father, suddenly raised his glass. "2-second chances," he said, looking directly at Dad, "and to the courage it takes to face our demons." Dad's eyes glistened with tears. "2-second chances," he echoed. "And a family, the one we're rebuilding, not the one we broke." After dinner, while Hannah showed Uncle Martin her latest art project and Thomas cleared the table, I found myself alone with my parents in the living room. "Hannah's foundation helped the Ramirez family last week," I told them, filling the silence. "Their daughter needs specialized treatment in Boston. We covered their hotel and transportation costs." "That's wonderful," Mom said. "Something good coming from something terrible. We're proud of you, Melissa," Dad added hesitantly. "We always were, though we didn't show it enough. You've built something meaningful from our greatest failure." "It wasn't just your failure," I acknowledged, surprising myself. "It was a family system that was broken long before Hannah got sick. It's favoritism, the secrets, the enabling. We all played our parts. But you broke the cycle," Mom pointed out. "You chose a different path." As they prepared to leave that evening, Dad handed me an envelope. "It's not much," he said. "It's just this month's payment. But I wanted to give it to you in person." Inside was a check for $300, a small fraction of what they still owed, but significant given their limited income. More important than the amount was the card that accompanied it, filled with Dad's careful handwriting, "Melissa, I know words are inadequate and money can never repay the true cost of what we did, but I want you to know that I am fighting my addiction every day, not just for myself, but for the chance to be worthy of being Hannah's grandfather again someday. With love and deepest regret." Dad, after they left, I sat on the porch swing, watching the November stars appear in the early evening sky. Hannah joined me, snuggling under a blanket against the chill. "Are you still sad about Grandma and Grandpa?" she asked, always perceptive. "Not sad exactly," I answered thoughtfully. "More like understanding that people can love you and still hurt you. And that sometimes you have to build new kinds of relationships after trust is broken. Like Humpty Dumpty," she nodded sagely. "All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back together again. But maybe they could build something different instead." I hugged her close, marveling at her wisdom. Exactly like that. The foundation I'd built from our family's tragedy continued to grow, helping more families each month. Thomas and I were exploring a carefully paced reconciliation, both changed by the experiences of the past year. Uncle Martin had become a beloved presence in our lives, the kind of grandfather figure Hannah deserved. My parents were working to earn back trust in small, consistent ways. And Jeffrey, he remained in Vegas, sending occasional impersonal text messages, but otherwise absent from our lives, a reminder that some breaches can't be repaired. Some relationships are healthier when ended. As for Hannah and me, we had emerged stronger from the crucible of betrayal and illness. We had learned that family isn't always defined by blood, that trust once broken must be earned anew, and that sometimes the deepest wounds lead to the most profound healing. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that forced you to redefine what family means? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If Hannah's journey touched your heart, please consider subscribing to this channel for more stories of family resilience and rebuilding after betrayal. Your likes and shares help these stories reach others who might be struggling with similar situations. Thank you for being part of our extended family and for reminding us that even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone. Until next time, remember that sometimes the family we choose becomes more precious than the family we're born into.